Well, it's good to be with you. So I wasn't quite sure what this was, and Julie kind of helped me understand some of the background. I was going to tell you a little bit about how I came into the church and my background. My mom and dad are both Jews. My grandparents are Jews. My great-grandparents are Jews. The names, so you guys know the last names. There's Barron, which is, Barron was my great-grandfather, got to Ellis Island, didn't speak any English, said his last name, and the guy at Ellis Island wrote down Barron. So we don't even know if legitimately if that makes sense. And then my grandmother on my father's name inside was Sadie Bachman. And if you've seen Fiddler on the Roof, that's my grandma. She's that, whatever you're picturing her, that's her. She spoke Russian, Yiddish, Hebrew, and English, but she preferred Yiddish. Yiddish was her first really language. And so that was that. Then my other side was Rozovsky and Finkelstone. So those are the four kind of last names. And I'm both Sephardic Jewish because my mom's side was in Spain, and then eventually went to Amsterdam and kind of Lithuania, then to England, Canada, the United States. And on my father's side, it was Russia. So my grandma Sadie escaped from Russia in 1915, right before the Russian Revolution, and ironically did not go to Eastern Europe, went Trans-Siberian Railroad to Vladivostok, and then to Kobe, Japan, and then to Seattle. So that side of the family, one side came through Ellis Island, the other side came through Seattle, which was super interesting. And I heard my grandma tell me that story my whole life. I didn't really believe it. And then when I did all this research, I found the manifest from Vladivostok to Kobe, and from Kobe to Seattle, and they went steerage class Kobe to Seattle. And that's why I never knew why my grandma would never go on a ship, but that's why. She was, with all the cattle, and she said it was horrible. So that's kind of the thing. So I was raised in a really good family. Like, my mom and dad are wonderful people. My grandfathers passed away much before I knew them, but my grandmas, Rebecca Finkelstone and Sadie Bachman, were amazing women. And again, sometimes people are, oh, you're a convert, you must have come from a very difficult background. You were looking for, I was like, no, my mom and dad were amazing. It was incredible. I went to Hebrew school as a child. I went to synagogue.
Test, one, two.
Friday night services, the holy days, through the whole year, on the calendar. I was bar mitzvahed when I was 13. And so kind of grew up in this very, and it was Los Angeles. So very Jewish. My mom and dad were more Reformed Jews. My grandparents were more conservative Orthodox Jews, if that makes sense, right? The generational shift there. And but again, I was raised in this particular area. Am I doing something wrong? Okay. And so, but I always had questions. And one of the questions that really kind of piqued me was when we would go to I don't know how much you know about LA, but there's an area in LA, Fairfax, the Fairfax area. And the Fairfax area is extremely Jewish. And so that's where my grandma Sadie lived. She lived in the Fairfax area. And I remember going one night to her home, her apartment, and there was a distant relative who was very kind of withdrawn. It was a woman, and she had a serial number on her arm. And I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and on the way home, I said, who was that? What was that? And then that's kind of my first big exposure, if you will, to the Holocaust. And it was rough. I mean, I remember really thinking long and hard about that. We had lots of conversations. And then my question to my mom and dad was, well, what happens when you die? And Judaism is amazing. It's an incredible religion. But some of the deeper, difficult questions, what Hugh Nibley called the terrible questions, they don't have great answers, right? Or their answers are kind of all over the place. So as an 8 or 9 year old, and I'm saying, what happens when you die? And they told me some stuff, and it didn't make much sense to me. And then as I grew a little older and was bar mitzvahed, I talked to the rabbis. And again, nothing offensive, nothing horrible. It just never really satisfied me. So while I was super happy in my Judaism, I was also doing searching and seeking and asking questions and being involved with all that. And in fact, I studied Buddhism. I never united myself, but I studied Buddhism. I studied Taoism, Hinduism, and this was the 70s. So I did transcendental meditation. Okay, thank you. And for laughing at that. because that was hip to do back then. And again, really good stuff, interesting. Never united myself, never felt that. So I was, again, happy going along. And then I had this weird experience. I was a senior in high school, and I decided I should read the New Testament. I can honestly say this. People ask me, so what did you guys think of Jesus? And I would respond sincerely, we didn't. Does that make sense what I just said? Like, it wasn't like there was an anti-Jesus sentiment. It just wasn't a thing. Does that make sense? Like, we just didn't talk about Jesus. Jesus wasn't a thing. So we just lived our lives, and we lived in a fairly prominently Jewish neighborhood in LA, and so it wasn't a thing. But I thought, I've studied Taoism, Hinduism, and all these kind of things. I should study the New Testament. And I thought, I've never laid eyes on a New Testament. I didn't have any idea what Christianity really believed. And the few Christian friends I had, I asked them one time, the one guy was an Episcopalian, and I said, what do Episcopalians believe? And he's like, I don't know. I really don't know. Like, okay, great. So anyway, I decide I'm going to check out the New Testament from my high school library. I'm a senior in high school. It's probably winter. I'm going to graduate in the summer. And so I decide I'm going to read the New Testament. Cool. So I go to the library and I said, I'd like to check out a New Testament. The librarian, for whatever reason, thinking I might put graffiti in it or something, said, you can't check out the New Testament, but you can read it in front of me. So I didn't know any better. I said, okay. And so she told me what time she got in. And so I used to drive to school, high school, and then I would go to the library and she would let me in, and then I would get my New Testament and she would have me read it, and she would, look at me every now and then. And it was the Phillips Modern English version. I didn't know there were different versions. I just had my Hebrew Tanakh, okay? I didn't have that. And so it was like, hey man, come follow me, dude. That was the version. Because, it wasn't the King James English. And I thought, wow, Jesus is cool. Like, I kind of get this. This is great. But I read, every day I'd go. And I read Matthew, and I read Mark, and I read Luke, and I read John. And I had this, now I'm going to use Latter-day Saint language right now. I didn't know this then, but I'm telling you now. I felt the Spirit. And like I said, I'd studied all these different religions. I had whoa, something happened. Well, he doesn't seem upset, okay. So I studied all these different religions, never had that kind of experience. Really had this powerful experience with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, okay? Really powerful. And so I thought, I believe this. Like, I believed it. And then I thought, what in the world am I going to do? Like, I was like, no way am I going to be joining a Christian church. Like, let's all be honest, that's weird. Right? And so I was just like, okay, so I decided I could still be Jewish, but I was going to be a Jesus follower. Again, I don't know if this is making sense to you, but I was like, I have some peace with that. I was a senior in high school. I was like, I'm going to do that. I had some friends, by the way, that were doing, all kinds of weird stuff and drugs and all kinds of things. And so they were going off on that end, and I was kind of doing this thing where I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm going to keep my Judaism. I'm just going to do it internally. I'm not going to let anybody know. And so going on in my high school brought me a lot of peace. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I felt good about it. And then I'm curious, and anyway, I was talking to this one guy, and he was a born-again Christian. And he said, hey, why don't you come to our born-again Christian club after school? And I said, okay, that sounds, I'll go. So I went, and it was everything you think it was. It was kind of weird, and nice people, though. And afterwards, he comes up to me and said, hey, what do you think? And I said, listen, appreciate you inviting me. I was trying to be polite. And then he said something that changed my life. And he said, I'm going to quote him, because that's how impactful it was. He said, quote, whatever you do, don't read the Book of Mormon. It's the devil's book, unquote. Now, I got to tell you two things, okay? Two things. You got to hold these thoughts. There was only like 4 or 5 Latter-day Saints in my high school, okay? So very few. One of them was this girl named Brooke, who was just a great young lady. Now, I didn't know her that well. I thought she was cute, by the way, just being honest. But she just had a glow about her, right? She just had a light about her. Isaiah says the show of their countenance doth witness against them, right? I hope Isaiah wouldn't be mad because the show of their countenance can witness for you as well. Does that make sense? Right? And so for her, I didn't know Brooke that well. We had some interaction. She never taught me about her beliefs, but there was that light about her. So and she was a Latter-day Saint. She was pretty open about it. So when the guy said, whatever you do, don't read the Book of Mormon, it's the devil's book, I instantly knew that wasn't true. Because I knew Brooke. Did y'all get that? So she never preached to me. I had no idea what she believed. But I knew she believed in the Book of Mormon because she was a Latter-day Saint. And so, anyway, he said that. And then the other thing that happened simultaneously was, I was like, first priority, get copy of Book of Mormon. So he said that to me. And he has no idea how many baptisms he's responsible for. But so he said that. So the next day in high school, there's another Latter-day Saint guy, Craig. We were friends. We surfed together and did things. And I said, hey, Craig, what do, and I'm going to say Mormons because that's what we said. And by Mormon, I mean member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I said, hey, what do Mormons believe? Bless the senior 17-year-old Latter-day Saint. He gives me the plan of salvation, like in 5 minutes, perfectly. But he did it in Southern California speak, which is really cool. It's like, dude, all right? We were like premortal spirits, all right? So if you're from Southern California, you know I'm doing a good job. But he kind of laid out that, and he got done. I was like, wow. Like he actually answered a ton of my questions. And I said, hey, is there any way like I can buy a Book of Mormon or get a copy? He goes, absolutely. Come to my house after school. We got a basket full of them. Now you're all laughing because you get it. But I was going, you have a basket full of, okay. So that afternoon, finished school, drove to Craig's house, and I ended up, his dad was there. We ended up talking for hours about the church and about the belief system and about the plan and answering my questions. And I said, listen, I had to go. And I said, I'd really love a copy of the Book of Mormon. Absolutely. I go, how much is it? Like, no, here, copy of the Book of Mormon. And then he goes, you like to read? And I said, I love to read. I'm like, I will devour. He goes, what about this? And he gave me Jesus the Christ by James E. Talmage, which is like that thick. And then he said, oh, and here's another one. He gave me Articles of Faith by James E. Talmage. And then he gave me a book we don't usually give out anymore, A Marvelous Work and a Wonder by LeGrand Richards. So I left going, thank you so much for these books. And in about 3.5 weeks-ish, I read the Book of Mormon, Jesus Christ, Articles of Faith, Marvelous Work and a Wonder. Prayed about it, knew it was true, and wanted to get baptized. Yeah, it's crazy. It's super weird. So they didn't hear from me because I was busy literally studying and praying. And I went to their house and knocked on their door and said, how can I join the church? And they said, well, you have to have the missionary discussions. Well, I said, what are missionaries? I don't know. And they explained it. And then these 2 guys from Idaho were my missionaries. And they'd never met a Jew. And I'd never met anybody from Idaho, so it all worked out, you know what I mean? But they didn't realize, I guess, kind of where I was. And I'm going to use a hymn book. Do you remember the old missionary discussions used to have like this flip chart, right? And there was a picture of Joseph Smith like in a rocking chair with a big Bible reading James 1:5. Do you remember that? And they're like, so, okay, I've read the Book of Mormon, Jesus Christ, Articles of Faith, Marvelous Work and Wonder. I've prayed about it. Oh, and by the way, my big issue was coffee. Do you know how everyone has an issue? Mine was coffee. I used to drink coffee with my dad every single day. We'd read the newspaper, talk, and we'd drink coffee. And then I cold turkey stopped drinking coffee. And my dad's like, uh-oh, right? So anyway, the missionaries are there, and they've got their flip chart, and there's that picture of Joseph Smith, and they're literally going like this. This is Joseph Smith. And he had a question, and I was like, elders, move this along, I'm good. And anyway, we accelerated the program, right, for me, and bless their hearts. And it was an amazing thing, and I got baptized. And it's interesting, if you have Jewish background, you know that this would have been traumatic for my family, right? but I was chicken and I didn't tell my parents. I got baptized after I turned 18. So I didn't tell my parents. And then I got assigned to give a talk in church. So here's my topic of my first talk. The bishop came to me and said, we'd like you to speak in church. I said, great. What do I speak on? And he said, you have to speak on your pre-existent relationship with Jesus Christ and how it affects you today. That was my first talk. Is that fair? Is that appropriate? I wrote it all out. I still have my yellow pad and that talk. And so I gave that talk. So it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after I was baptized, which is really weird. Now that I look back, you just don't do that to a new convert in sacrament meeting, right? So I gave the talk. These women were in the grocery store in the area we lived. My aunt was standing behind them. And my aunt, these women are going on about this new Jewish boy in church who gave this talk, and they're just going on. And finally my aunt behind them, eavesdropping the whole time, says, excuse me. Do you remember his name? And they're like, oh, no, let's see. Ross Barron. And my aunt just starts sobbing right there in the grocery store and runs and calls my parents, and it was not good. And it was a difficult thing, as you can imagine, right? As you guys can imagine. And it was a hard situation. So then they finally got used to it, and I got baptized, of course. I'm active in the church, and I want to go on a mission that day. If you know the policy of the church, you can't submit till you've been a member a year. So I've got my calendar marked. I'm going to submit at the year. I'm doing all my preparation. And my dad owned a medical distribution company. I worked in the warehouse, and I had cut my hair, paid off my car, did my dentistry. You guys all know, you're right, what I'm doing. And so I get this thing. It says, Ross Barron, come up to the front desk, please. So I go up. That means my dad wants to talk to me in the executive offices. I go up there, and my dad goes, hey, it's been about 10 months since I've been a member. He goes, I have to tell you, you're doing really well. We're super impressed. And you cut your hair, you paid off your car, you did all, just great job. I was like, now, then I get my mission call, and I haven't told them. So my parents are talking to my sister, and they're like, oh, Ross has cut his hair, he's paid off his car. And my sister had Latter-day Saint friends. She goes, that means he's going on a mission. And my parents are like, what? So the next day, Ross Barron, come up to the front desk, please. So I go up, and my dad's like, are you going on a mission? I was like, yeah. He goes, where are you going? Argentina. And he says, oh, my word. So I had to explain the mission. And this was in the day when you can only talk on Christmas and Mother's Day. Remember that? It's not like now. We could get a cell phone and talk all the time. And so it was very difficult for them. But to their credit, they've been very, very supportive. Very supportive. And I want to tell you another really quick little story. I was at BYU, Idaho for 17 years. Okay? So I don't know if you guys know who Kim Clark is. Kim Clark was the former dean of the Harvard Business School, and then President Hinckley called him to be the president of BYU, Idaho. And so we both got there exactly at the same time. So in June, July of 2005, that's when President Clark came. And he's just amazing. I don't know if you remember the Charlie Rose show, but Charlie Rose was a guy who interviewed people. And my mom and dad were kind of upset that I'd left Southern California and we're going to BYU, Idaho. Their grandchildren and my wife and everybody, but we were going to BYU, Idaho. We were at BYU, Idaho, and Charlie Rose did an interview with Kim Clark. And he said this to Kim Clark. He goes, you're the dean of the Harvard Business School. That's the center of the universe. And you're going to Rexburg, Idaho to be the president of BYU, Idaho? And he's like, BYU, Idaho, Harvard. And Kim Clark goes to Charlie Rose. It's on the thing. You guys can go fact check me. Kim Clark says, well, Charlie, let me ask you a question. If Moses asked you to do something, would you do it? And Charlie Rose goes, what? He goes, if Moses asked you to do something, would you do it? And Charlie Rose goes, if Moses asked me to do something, I think I'd do it. And Kim Clark looks at him and goes, Moses asked me to do something, and his name's Gordon P. Hinckley. He asked me to go to BYU, Idaho. I go to BYU, Idaho. Now, my parents, unbeknownst to me, are watching this. And they call me, and they're like, Kim Clark is amazing. He's incredible. Now, I'd never met him. So we had this big meeting like 2 days later with all the faculty and Kim Clark, and he gave this incredible talk. Then he did Q&A. And I raised my hand. And I said, President, hey, I just want to thank you for your Charlie Rose interview. My mom and dad, who are not members of the church, watched it, and they were just so impressed. He's like, thank you. The next day I saw him on the quad, and he goes, tell me your name again. And I told him, and he goes, I've been thinking about you all night. He goes, I want to invite your mom and dad as my private guests to my inauguration. President Hinckley will be here. President Monson will be here. It was President Monson, President Hinckley. Who was the other counselor then? Was it President Faust? Yeah. And he says, I want to invite them up. I was like, what do you think? I was like, yes. So he invited my mom and dad up, and they got to spend time with the First Presidency. I didn't get to. And with Kim Clark and his wife Sue, and had this incredible, amazing experience. So my mom and dad have had amazing experiences, and they defend the church. So they're in circles in LA that I cannot get into, these very high-end circles, and people will bring the church up, and my mom and dad will defend the church. In fact, my mom says, because she knows the language, she goes, I bear my testimony more about the church than I think you do. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, we're at this dinner party or with this estate dinner, and people will be like, Mormons this. And my mom will be like, actually not true. And then everyone's like, what? And my mom then and my dad explain, right? Because my kids have served missions and they've been in church. And does that make sense? So they're not Latter-day Saints, but they're defenders of the church, and they're amazing people. So I wanted to share that with you. I want to tell you another little story that happened to me. We've got Elder Rona here, who's been in Jerusalem more than any human being may be possible. I was there 2018, 2019. And I had an experience at the Jerusalem Center. Well, I had an experience at Jerusalem that I wanted to share with you. I think it might be of interest to you. I think most of you know that we're very serious about our non-proselyting agreement with the state of Israel. We are really, really careful, okay? And so back in 1987, 1988, when they were going to put the Jerusalem Center where it is, which is the greatest spot of real estate in the world, and only the Lord could have done that. But in any case, I was taking my students on a tour of the Kotel, which is, there's the Western Wailing Wall, and you can go to it and you don't need any kind of special permissions. But if you want to go down underneath and go through the whole thing, you need an Israeli guide. And Jerusalem Center people don't need Israeli guides. Do you have to have an Israeli guide? That's a bummer. Yeah, anyway, we'll talk about that later. So, but we had an Israeli guide. And he was an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, and I had my 43 students with me. It's about an hour and a half, and we did the tour. It was great. I didn't say much because it's their thing. When we got done, he asked to speak with me. And I was like, okay, sure. And he spoke, and he said to me, hey, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. He goes, 30 years ago, I picketed that you would come here. Like, I was 100% against this. I made phone calls. I petitioned. I sent money in. I was absolutely against the BYU Jerusalem Center. He goes, 30 years later, you guys 100% have kept your word. Your students are the best and the brightest, and I am your greatest advocate in Israel. I was like, oh. It was like church video moment right there. Gosh, can you say that again? Let me get my phone out. It was incredible. It was like an unsolicited testimony. And this fulfills when President Faust was involved and they met with Mayor Kolek, Teddy Kolek, yeah. He said, he goes, I believe you guys are not going to proselyte. But what do you know the story? What are you going to do about the light in their eyes? And this is what happened. It literally is fulfilled. The people in the state of Israel, Elder Rona they love us. They love us. And in the Middle East in general, by the way. And it's because we've kept our word. Because we've had that experience. I was in Nazareth once at this, it's a Crusader church over where they say the synagogue was, where Jesus read Luke 4, where he read Isaiah 61. And we were in there, and generally it's packed, but it was just our students. And then at the end of every time we talk in any place, we sing. And we're singing hymns, and Latter-day Saint youth can sing, and they sing well. And unbeknownst to us, some people had come in who weren't part of our group. And we finished singing, and the last song we sang was, "We're trying to be like Jesus." And I mean, the Spirit was so incredible. And these people were like, "Who are you people? What are we feeling?" But you can't preach. Like my missionary hat is like, wah, but we're like, all we can say is we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we kept the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, right? I mean, we're very strict about it. But it's an amazing thing of what's going on. And what I learned, God is going to do his work his way. I think of missionary work as a tag with a white shirt and I'm out doing it. The Lord's going to do his work his way. And he doesn't give two hoots about what I think about how he should do his work. And so in the Holy Land, in the Middle East, sometimes people go, "Oh, we don't have missionaries there." And that's technically true. But in a way, we do have missionaries there. It's the members of the church. It's the BYU Jerusalem Center. It's the Elder Ronas of the world who are keeping their commitments and being a light. And I'm here to tell you that the missionary work is going on in the Holy Land and in Egypt and in other places that we wouldn't think of. Again, not in traditional ways, but in ways more powerful in some respects, if that makes sense, right? Okay, so I joined the church, I got baptized, I got married in the temple in Los Angeles to my wife. My wife is like a sixth generation Latter-day Saint. She's a direct descendant of Levi Ward Hancock. She's an Ephraimite through and through. If she walked in, you'd be like, Ephraimite. And so, right? And so I'm Judah to fulfill the prophecy that Judah won't vex Ephraim and Ephraim won't vex Judah anymore. And so we're that prophecy fulfillment. And we have 9 children, a bunch of grandchildren. And my career has been in seminaries and institutes. I had a career in private business, but I wasn't on earth to do that. And so I was successful at it, but I sold it. And I taught at BYU, Idaho. I taught an institute down at Claremont in Southern California, in Glendora. Went to BYU, Idaho. I was at the Jerusalem Center. Went back to BYU, Idaho. And then I was asked by the Board of Education if I'd go to BYU. And now I'm in Ancient Scripture at BYU. And love being there. I have amazing colleagues and get to teach the gospel to amazing young people all day, every day. I have the dream job. So the gospel's been restored. The church is true. And everything it claims it is. And I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Now, I'd be willing to take any questions. I'm an open book. You can ask me anything, and I'm happy to respond. Please.
This may sound funny, but I'm serious. Did your parents sit Shiva for you?
They didn't. Yeah, they didn't. The question was, did my parents sit Shiva for me? And they didn't. I think they thought about it, honestly. But I think they made Shiva is where you mourn for the dead. So that I joined the church, I died. And I told you, like, my mom and dad were more Reformed Jews. My grandparents, I have to tell you, though, you'll like this. My grandmother, Sadie, was alive when I got baptized. And she was old. And so she would tell her Yiddish friends, "My grandson has become a Norman." And so my mom and dad heard that, and so I went and talked to him. She lived in Fairfax. I went and said, "Grandma, I'm not a Norman. I'm a Mormon." And she goes, "Norman, Mormon, what's the difference?" Didn't get the nuance. And then another time when I was dating Kathleen, my wife, my grandma says, she says mazel. So that's what she called me, mazel. She'd say mazel. That means luck in Yiddish, Hebrew too, mazel. Yeah, mazel. So she says mazel. She says, "I need you to make me a promise." I go, "What, Grandma?" She says, "I need you to marry a Jewish girl. It's my dying promise." And I said, "Grandma, I promise you I'll marry a girl from the house of Israel." And then she said, "Bless you, my son." So phew, I got out of that one, right? Man, oh man. So that was kind of fun, yeah. So no, they didn't sit Shiva. I think they thought about it. Yeah.
I don't need a mic, but... Oh, sorry about that. So, when you joined the church, and of course, you read LeGrand Richard's book, did you read also Israel Do You Know?
I did.
And B.H. Roberts' Rasha the Jew?
Yep.
Did you carry on your traditions and taught the Gentile LDS, fill it in with the traditions that made sense from a Jewish background.
I did. So I read the books you just said, and then I also had read that were not Jewish necessarily, but I read, Matthias Cowley's Wilful Woodruff, and I read Orson F. Whitney's Heber C. Kimball, and I just immersed myself in the documented history of the church, the 6 volumes, before my mission. And so, I taught people all the time. And we've carried on some of the traditions, not all of them, but I'm hyper... what I really like to do is take the Hebrew calendar from Leviticus chapter 23 and overlay that in terms of the plan of salvation, the restoration in Jesus Christ. I love doing that. I also really love to show the tabernacle, the clothing the priests wore, the day at Yom Kippur. I love to do that as well. So I really, in my classes, highlight that. I also, where's Victoria? Victoria's right there. She took 2 years of Hebrew from me at BYU, Idaho. I taught Hebrew for 15 years at BYU, Idaho. Biblical Hebrew, right? And Victoria did well. Hard class, though. Very hard class, because Hebrew's hard. So I do all that stuff, and I love that stuff. And to this day, like in my class this morning, talked about some of these things. Yeah. So I teach these big classes, at BYU, 200 students. Yeah.
Did any of your family members got stuck with the Holocaust?
Yes. So not my direct line, but cousins were in the Holocaust. Aunts, uncles, but not my... So my parents, my grandparents avoided the Holocaust, but not others.
Because in my family, 161 families with one same last name all ended up in Auschwitz.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Other
That's so sorry. I'm so sorry. So sad. So sad. Okay, any other questions? Okay, wait, got one. Wait.
Hello? All right, second question though. Because this was my experience, was the moment I learned the doctrine of the church was the first time in my life that the Old Testament actually made sense.
Yep.
Did you? Okay. So
Yep,
you already
100%.
answered my question. Thank you.
100%. 100%. I'm teaching a Writings of Isaiah class right now.
Well, being named Isaac, I always had an affinity for that story.
Of course.
It doesn't make any sense because everyone was like, oh, it was challenging Abraham's faith.
Right.
Abraham and Isaac at least. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that was a temple moment. He
Yeah.
literally taught him the plan of salvation.
Yeah.
And here's why you're doing sacrifices. And I had no clue. I felt like Super Jew for a while.
That's great.
Weird.
Super G, that's cool.
I was wondering what your thoughts were about the possibility or impossibility of ever seeing the Book of Mormon in Hebrew.
Yeah, so, Elder Rona and I were talking about that. So because the church, and you can add it, okay, if I say something wrong here. Because the church has a non-proselyting agreement with the state of Israel, and because the church also has an agreement with Jewish organizations to not do Holocaust names in the temple unless you're a direct descendant, we're hypersensitive about that, and the brethren are hypersensitive about that. So there is no official Hebrew translation right now. So you can get a Hebrew translation on eBay, and you could go and find one. They're not sanctioned by the church. Do I believe there will be one? I do believe there will be one. But now is not the time. He sets the calendar, and it's the first shall be last, the last shall be first. And right now we're still technically in the time of the Gentile, right? And so that's my take. Feel good about that?
It's great.
Okay. So by the way, one of my assignments in my Hebrew class is to take English translations from the Book of Mormon and translate them to Hebrew. And so I've been working on a Hebrew translation on my own. But again, it's going to be under the direction of the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12. Yeah.
Does the patriarchal blessing stated in the tribe of Judah?
It does. And this is cool. I would only been a member of the church, 4 months. And my bishop said, you need to get a patriarchal blessing. I didn't know what a patriarchal blessing was. So he gives me the address. He gives me a recommend. I drive to this house, humble little home, and this like old guy's there. And this old guy kind of sits me down. He talked to me for like 3 minutes. And he goes, okay. And then he put on 2 tape recorders. He did. He had put them around us and said, I have these 2 tape recorders because if one fails, I want to be able to give you the blessing. He laid his hands on my head and gave me the most amazing blessing. I couldn't believe because he was kind of senile, honestly, and a little out of it. But then when he placed his hands on my head and gave me the blessing, it was like the heavens open. It was incredible. He said things in there that are literally fulfilled, and he said things that no one knew but God. It was amazing. Yeah, House of Judah. Yeah, House of Judah.
Did you tell him that you
No,
were a Jewish pastor?
no. And he didn't he was like, looked at the recommend, put it on the side. Again, I felt like, uh-oh. Am I going to have to give this guy heart? I didn't know. I was like, anyway, so I didn't tell him anything. Yeah, it was incredible.
My father's says that he's from the tribe of Judah, but mine says I will stand with the great house of Ephraim. And I don't feel like it's accurate. I know.
Oh, it's accurate. Listen, at this stage in the world's development, there's so much intermingling. Does that make sense? And so my oldest son got a blessing, and he's from Ephraim, but the patriarch afterwards said, he's got a lot of Judah in him, but the Lord told me to declare it from Ephraim. So very, very, very few people are one solid tribe, right?
I know that my grandmother was from Levi.
Right.
And then my grandfather was from Judah.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I'm Jewish.
Okay. Well, we support you in that.
Do you have a Book of Mormon in Hebrew?
I don't. I just asked her. I don't have one. The church doesn't have one. You can get one on eBay. Yeah.
I have one.
Oh wow. Okay. You've got.
They used to have one.
Yes.
that was
Exactly.
square,
Yeah.
and they only made 500 copies. And then when the thing came through that we could not cross the line,
Yeah.
they locked them up. But I had persuaded them
Wow.
to give
Good
me
for
one.
you.
And so I
I'm
do have one.
I'm impressed. You've got some contraband. Chutzpah.
Too often we connect the Jerusalem Center and the non-publishing of the Book of Mormon. They're 2 separate things. I know Jonathan Shinari, and even he admits it's not biblical Hebrew. His depth wasn't there.
Right.
Hebrew's a very small language. Words are used multiple times.
Right.
And every time they're connected, so it's not quite ready. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
There are 17 million Latter-day Saints on the planet. There are 17 million Jews on
Right.
the planet.
Right.
Together, we make 0.4% of the population of the world. The gifts to humanity from Latter-day Saints and Jews is more than all the rest of the world combined.
I agree.
What do we need to do, if I could put my Latter-day Saint cap on, to come together? What responsibility do members of the church have, or where are we going so that we will be united, and it may be not in a day, but like a nation in a day?
Born in a day. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I've thought about this. And I think the first thing he said, if make sure you understand, we are so overrepresented in every single field in terms of our proportion to the United States, to the world, right? Except in golf. Top 50 golfers, there's not one Jew, just so you guys know. I checked. And so, but your question's a little different, and I think it's an interesting question. The instrument of the gathering is the Book of Mormon. And again, we're in the time of the Gentiles still, but God is doing things his way. And as you know, the Jewish people have tremendous, tremendous respect for the members of the church. Elder Quentin L. Cook has been kind of leading out in terms of the United States and other areas, in terms of Jewish and Latter-day Saint relations. He's the apostle kind of doing that now. It used to be more Elder Holland. It's now Elder Cook and Elder Holland. But I think that's the way it's going to go. The Lord's going to lead us. We have to be ready. You and I have to be ready when they want us there. But for now, we've got to let the Lord do his thing. Because I've thought about this a lot, and we got to push to the degree that we can, but we can't get in front of the first presidency in the 12. Can't get in front of the prophets. Okay, brother.
So we have two groups, LDS and Jewish people, who have a great deal of interest in temples.
Yes.
And the new temple in Jerusalem will, of course, need to be built
Yes.
before the second coming.
Yes.
So is there any information or thoughts about perhaps LDS being of help in some way in relation to the rebuilding of the temple?
From their perspective or from our perspective?
Either one. I assume from their perspective, not much.
Okay. So I had some, in the old city, there's a group there that wants to build the next temple, right? We all know that. Here's the deal. And here's something Jews get that Protestants don't get. So if you really get with some people that know, Jews that know their Tanakh, their Old Testament, their Hebrew Bible, they know that the biggest issue in Ezra and Nehemiah is who has the authority. When they come back from Babylon, that's the question. How do we officiate in the temple? Because if we can't get these clean Levite lines, we can't do the work. So one of the problems in 2025 for Jews in Israel who want to build the temple is that question. Who has the authority? Isn't that interesting? This is the issue. So keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. They're going to keep asking that question, and there's going to be a point in time when we're going to be able to say, we have the authority. And they're going to say, and they're going to feel the spirit of that, and we're going to join together and build that temple. But does that make sense? So if you get that, right? And then the other issue that's interesting, and it's a little more tangential, but today, by the way, happy Elijah Day. Today is April 3rd. 189 years ago today, Elijah showed up on Passover. As they opened the door worldwide, Elijah came to the temple and bestowed those keys. Well, they know the Malachi prophecy. If you know anything about Passover, why in the world would Elijah be part of your Passover Seder? He wasn't living at Moses' time. That's way late. Well, it's because Jews are smart and they get Malachi. And he says, behold, before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, I have to send Elijah the prophet. And if you ask them, has Elijah come yet? That's an uncomfortable question for them. But we're going to be able to bear witness. Elijah came. Elijah came and we have the authority. Partner with us. That make sense? That's power. That is power. So today is Elijah Day. Yep.
So a follow-up to that question,
Sorry. No fighting.
I was going to ask Andrew Rona, and you mentioned Jonathan Chenard. So back in 1976, I took Hebrew classes from Dr. Chenard. And he was commissioned, this is my understanding, he was commissioned by the church to come here with his mother, he was a single man, to translate the Book of Mormon into Hebrew. And I know, like she said, that there are Book of Mormons translated into Hebrew. I don't have one.
She's got the contraband, yeah.
And Daniel, you said that it's not exactly correct. Is that what you're saying? I don't know. But I do know that there are Book of Mormon that are translated.
Right. I have one in my office that I got on eBay. And it's more, honestly, it's more of a modern Hebrew. And it doesn't sound good to my ear. Because the Book of Mormon is a Hebraistic book that I think needs to be, and I think he would agree with me, and I think you need a Don Perry, a Stephen Ricks, you need an Elder Rona. We need people that know the biblical Hebrew. And like he said, words have a lot of latitude in Hebrew, and you've got to finesse some things in terms of the parsing. There's some interesting things that are going on in biblical Hebrew.
Regarding biblical Hebrew, there is a fellow who passed away 2 years ago, but he had his doctorate degree in ancient languages and was very good at biblical Hebrew. He translated, before he passed away, about 2/3 of the Book of Mormon into biblical Hebrew.
Right.
And so I have a copy of that.
Nice. But let me be clear though. Until the first presidency in the 12 give it their okay, the Holy Ghost will not accompany it. Okay? So when the first presidency in the 12 give it their okay, then there will be probably a committee, and I'm sure Elder Rona will be on that committee, and Don Perry and Stephen Ricks and other Hebraists, and they'll be led by the gift of the Holy Ghost under the direction of the 12, and then it'll be amazing. Right? But until that time, we might have a little of this, a little of that. But we'd have to be super careful, even if you had one now, to not use it, because we're not to do that right now. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just
wanted to follow up. So, long story, but I've had numerous discussions with Jews, rabbis, Chabad, and I asked them, I says, when did Elijah become part of the Passover Seder?
Right.
They all give me all sorts of answers.
Right.
But the same argument. He wasn't around during
Right.
Moses.
Right.
So, but something came and stuck that now it's all part of Seder.
Right. And if you ask a Reformed Jew, they have no idea why. They think Elijah must have lived around Moses' time. He's not. It's a post-exilic addition, right, to that. Please.
My question is, with the Book of Mormon, what about it to you feels the most Hebrew? Or like, is there something that was just
Yeah, I'll tell you.
obvious?
It's really interesting. My theory is, and it'd be an interesting study, that First Nephi is as Hebrew as it gets syntactically. And as the more you go on in the Book of Mormon, the less Hebrew it gets, even though they're still there. Okay? So super First Nephi, Second Nephi, but the more you're getting into Alma, Helaman, and right Mormon, Ether, Moroni, less. And so at first I was like, whoa. Now I'll tell you one last story, and then I got to end. It's getting late, etc. But let me tell you this. Okay, this is amazing. I had a girl from Rexburg was on her mission in Indianapolis, and apparently there's a Hasidic Jewish community in Indianapolis. I didn't know that, but there is. And apparently these sister missionaries, there was a Hasidic young Jewish man, and he kind of was abrasive to the sister missionaries. They were walking through the area, got super abrasive, and the missionaries were awesome. They're like, we're a representative of Jesus Christ. And he's like, rah, yelling at them and stuff. And they just were, and he finally said, well, do you have anything I can read? So they gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon. He calls him a week later, and he goes, who wrote this book? Again, very abrasive. And they're like, well, Joseph Smith, translated by the gift and power of God. And he said, is Joseph Smith from the United States? And yes, then he didn't write it. And they're like, that's what we said. He translated by the gift and power of God. And he was like really abrasive. No American could have written this book. This book is a Middle Eastern book. It comes from there, and on and on. And so he ends up having the missionary discussions and gets baptized. How many Hasidic Jews get baptized? One. He's it. And isn't that interesting? But he saw in the text, reading it independently, that this was not a book generated from the United States. It's not that book. And I think that's fascinating. I think it's amazing. Okay? Right? Yes, sir. You need a mic. Oh, you have a question. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Kind of from the point of view of, there's a lot of different Jewish groups.
Yes.
And they look at Mormons a certain way and maybe Christians in a certain way. Use the mic. And so they look at Mormons in a certain way, general Christians in a certain way. How do they see the Messianic Jews?
Okay, yeah. Let's see. I want to be kind because I want to be a peacemaker. how do they see it? They see Messianic Jews as evangelical Christians. Honestly. And they don't associate Latter-day Saints with that, which is good. I'm trying to be as sweet and as kind as I can be right now. So that's how they see it. A Messianic Jew is more of an evangelical Christian. And Latter-day Saints who are converts are not. And they do make that distinction. I think that that's the correct perception. And I don't want to be perceived as that. Okay, I did that well. I'm not going to get in trouble on Facebook or YouTube. That was good.
Just for comfort's sake, there is a formal agreement that the church penned, the First Presidency signed, saying that they would not proselytize or anything like unto it, as long as it was against the laws of the state of Israel. First Presidency signed it. No one in Israel has signed it. The reason I bring that up is because there is hope. The truth thunders so softly.
That's right.
And it won't be signed.
I don't. No way. No way.
But it's an agreement, and even if it's one-sided, it's just not the time.
It's not the time. 100%. I 100% agree. Couldn't agree more. Just so you guys know, the executive director, the person that runs the Jerusalem Center on a day-to-day basis, is an Israeli Jew named Aran Hayat. Okay? And his co-director is Tawfiq Alawi, a Palestinian. And everybody who works in the Jerusalem Center, outside of faculty, are Israeli Jews or Palestinians. And I think what the First Presidency is saying, through that, we know how to do it. We know how to do this. When you go to the Jerusalem Center, you feel like you're in a temple. There's a peace there. And so you've got Israeli Jews working together with Palestinians. The director is an Israeli Jew. His co-director is a Palestinian. And they work together in harmony and peace. And I think we're saying, you want to know how to do it? We know how to do it. We can do this. This is the light on the hill. It's amazing. It's power. Go ahead.
I went and did an initiatory today at the temple, and when I got home, I had this really happy feeling about the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, and how complete and how we are so privileged, I feel, and so blessed to be doing more or all of the ordinances that were ever done in history, and maybe more, maybe you can elaborate on this, in our modern religion, kind of the combination of what the Jewish people believe, the house of Israel. I feel like we're tying the bow in this dispensation to the gifts that God has given us.
Amen.
And we're doing it all. And we're so blessed to be able to participate in this way. And we're not Jewish. We're from the house of Israel.
Right.
As
Amen.
Gentiles.
Amen. I love it.
And maybe you can elaborate, like, are the Jewish people still performing Mosaic? No? Okay.
No.
And why not?
Okay, and this is an authority issue. It's a temple issue. It's a Levite issue. It's a Cohenite issue. But they get certain things and they're not doing any of that. No. Not at all. And don't really get it either. Again, with all respect. Right. Don't get it.
This is probably a really stupid question. But then I think I preface all my questions that way. So the thing that bugs me most about a lot of Latter-day Saints now is that all of these, I guess, traditions and celebrations, like, if we're of the house of Israel, then why aren't we still doing Passover? I mean, we do it in our family, but why isn't, some people say, well, the sacrament, when Jesus instituted the sacrament, that meant we didn't need to do Passover anymore, and yet scriptures say we need to do it.
Yeah, well, my response...
But what about, like, all the other things, and, like, why don't we still do them? Why don't we do them as a church?
Yeah.
And then when, like, we don't even know about them. You know, like most of the Latter-day Saint world doesn't even know about them or understand them, and why? Like, why don't we do all these things?
So, I would literally suggest to you that the sacrament is the Passover. Okay, so that what you do when you partake of the sacrament is the Passover. And the way that Jews do the Passover now, we should be clear, is post-exilic from Babylon. Exodus chapter 12 is the Passover, and it's not the traditional Seder with a Haggadah that we have now. So again, the Haggadah and the Passover Seder is an accretion over 1,000 years of rabbinic additions. Does that make sense? So the original Passover, if you want to do a Passover, do Exodus 12. Again, I love the Passover. I do it with my family according to my traditions. But I tell my family, Moses didn't do it this way. Okay? So we got to be clear. The other thing too is Leviticus 23, I referenced earlier, has the holy calendar on it with all the different holy days. It doesn't have Purim on it, and it doesn't have Hanukkah on it. Those came later. But remember what Jesus said. I came to fulfill the law of Moses. So we don't do like Yom Kippur, the Day of the Atonement, because it was pointing to what Jesus did, right? Rosh Hashanah is actually not Rosh Hashanah. It's the Feast of Trumpets. It's on 1 Tishri, which is going to be September, October-ish. And so it's not... Anyway, that's a whole separate subject. My point is, we fulfill the law of Moses. The Passover is the sacrament, and we are doing all those holy things. And we should be careful not to think that the way they've been doing these holy days, again, no offense towards any Jewish tradition, but they're traditions. And we don't really know how they did Yom Kippur. I know how my parents do Yom Kippur, but that's not necessarily how it was done according to Leviticus 16. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, last question.
So, kind of a little bit more of a common last question, but I don't know if you've heard of One for Israel, but they are a big group that you can see on YouTube and everything like that. They're actually in Israel.
Uh-huh.
And they have...
Echad le'Israel.
One for Israel. They have amazing videos out there, and they are working within Israel, converting thousands of Jews to Christianity through their videos.
Yeah.
And there is some major work going right now inside of Israel where people are being converted into Christianity, Jews and Palestine.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm a little ambivalent about that, only because of our agreement that we have with the State of Israel, which they haven't signed. But I'm a little ambivalent about it, a little bit, you know. Again, the Lord's going to do his work, and this might be the way he's doing some of it. Does that make sense? Right? But yeah, I don't know, a little ambivalent about that. Well, thank you so much. It's been great to be with you. And thank you, Julie, for inviting me. And it's been an awesome experience.